What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined by not Daniel this week. Daniel on vacation, so we got our good friend David Cobb from CBS Sports to fill in this week. David, how's it going, man?
Going well. I know that was hard for you on the intro because every time you're like joined as always by my co-host.
Yep.
Next, so you kind of had to eliminate some muscle memory there.
It's routine. Someone asked me one time, like, what the intro and closing is, and I'm like, I don't know what I say. I'm like, let me go through it for a second because it's muscle memory. So glad I didn't say Daniel and got it right this time. But dude, thanks so much for being on. This is like, I think your fifth time back on the podcast. So we met, 2 years ago now. So we met in 2020, right? Or was it 2021?
That was 21. So yeah.
Oh, okay. It's a little over a year. Okay. But David, good to have you back. David is one of the college football and college basketball writers for CBSSports.com. You can follow him at David A. Cobb on Twitter. So, David, we have a special game for you to talk about, which we'll get to in just a few minutes because we had to have our college football / basketball expert for a huge game this week in college football. But, David, before we get to our slate of 7 games, what's a game that we're not talking about, we're not picking, that you're excited to watch this weekend?
I think Kansas State, Oklahoma could get sneaky interesting. Maybe people are sleeping on the Wildcats after they laid an egg against Tulane, but still a team that generated a lot of preseason hype as a sleeper in the Big 12. And then you got to think Oklahoma might be feeling itself a little bit coming off that, just absolute demolition of Nebraska and Lincoln. So that could be an interesting spot because I think K-State historically in the last several years has played Oklahoma reasonably well. And I don't think they're down for the count just because they had a bad week 3. So you got to think, I mean, that was a non-conference loss. There's got to be 2 teams in the Big 12 championship at the end of the year. Now, Baylor hasn't exactly blown my socks off yet this year. So who's going to be that second team if we're assuming that one is going to be Oklahoma? Even if K-State doesn't win this one, a decent showing could be a good indication that they're not done yet.
Kansas State has beaten Oklahoma 2 out of their last 3 meetings, but I'm very glad I did not drink that Kool-Aid preseason, but I did drink that Texas Kool-Aid. So we'll see Texas in the Big 12 championship, but I will stay in the Big 12. Iowa State, Baylor. Iowa State a 3-point favorite at home. So one of these, it's funny, early season, the AP rankings versus the, what Vegas has power rated. Iowa State, the unranked team, 3-point favorite. I'm staying far away because I was dead wrong. My only loss last week on the podcast was I said it was my WTF game of the week, wrong team favored. Wise Michigan State, a dog on the road, and they just got boat raced out of Seattle. So Iowa State, maybe they're just going to boat race Baylor on Saturday. We'll see, but want to watch that one.
Yeah, last year everybody was all aboard the Cyclone train there. It was going to be their breakthrough season. Didn't work out. Now's the time to get them. That was my philosophy with North Carolina, picking them to hit their over on their win, preseason win total. Looking pretty good so far. It's like when the hype follows a team, they generally tend to underperform. And now people are just thinking that Iowa State's going to recede back to 6-6. I mean, they've got a chance here to get in that Big 12 mix.
We are 3. Was North Carolina 7.5? Was it the total?
Yeah, because there was no certainty that they would win either of their opening games, against Appalachian State, and then they were at Georgia State, which is a tricky spot. So now that the Sun Belt has looked like a juggernaut, the fact that they won those games, it actually stands out as being fairly impressive.
That's an underrated game too this week. Notre Dame. That line's like at 1 point right now, so that'll be one I'm watching as well. Dave, let's get to our slate. So 7 games we're going to talk about. Oregon State, USC, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Washington State, Oregon, Texas Tech, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Wake Forest, Clemson. But we are starting with, it's the college basketball blue blood college football game of the week. We have undefeated Kansas, undefeated Duke in Kansas. Kansas a 9-point favorite. I mean, David, you said y'all got some stuff coming on CBS Sports this week. The basketball schools are killing it in college football so far this year.
They really are. It's insane. I don't think anybody expected Duke to look even remotely competent in year 1 under Mike Elko, considering the absolute dearth of talent that appears when you grab that preseason magazine and look at their roster. But man, they've been pretty decent so far. And granted, they really haven't played anyone considering that Northwestern has turned out to be a total dud and a total flop. But what a scene! What a scene in Lawrence, Kansas, the Duke Blue Devils. The fact that that's actually a matchup of undefeated teams blows my mind. I still think that if they played that game in a basketball arena with or like in a dome or something in a NCAA tournament game, like the basketball game would still generate higher attendance than this football games this week.
Probably.
It'll still be fun. Some of my Tennessee friends were mad that a lot of people were online suggesting that game day should have gone to Lawrence. They were like, "Whoa, that's so dumb." Tennessee Florida is going to be a top 20 matchup, and I'm like, guys, it would be funny. It would be cool to see the national spotlight on a Duke Kansas football game like that. So I am looking forward to this one,
Dude, for the same reason that it was cool to see App State Troy get some national spotlight. Like, throw them a bone. Yeah, so I will out myself. I was pulling up our preseason picks for the ACC. 2-10 was Jacob's prediction. So they're 3-0 already.
Totally reasonable prediction. So I'm actually going with the Jayhawks though here in this one. Like I said, I just don't think that, well, I'll say this. I just don't think that the Northwestern win has really held up as well as maybe Duke would have liked for it to, because they beat Northwestern after Northwestern beats Nebraska. So you're like, oh wow, like Duke is legit. But then Northwestern turns around and becomes the first Power 5 team this season to lose to a Group of 5 school, and not even really a good group of, an FCS school, and not even really a good FCS school in Southern Illinois last week. So I'm a little down on Northwestern. I think that delegitimizes the Duke, their banner victory so far. But you look at Kansas, they've scored 103 points the last 2 weeks against quality opponents. And granted, they were helped with a defensive touchdown there in the overtime win against Houston. But still, I mean, Daniels is legit, and they've got 2 running backs averaging over 6 yards a carry. So I think Kansas can really outscore Duke in this matchup.
I think Kansas wins. I think it's too many points. I like the 9. I would love it to be at 10, but I'm going to take Duke. I'm going to take the points. So, I mean, number one, in a game of Duke and Kansas being undefeated, I feel like it's just principle to just take some points here, especially over a touchdown. But Kansas's pass defense overall, but pass defense specifically is what is scaring me off of laying the points with Kansas here. Duke's success rate with the pass actually ranks top 30 in the country, and Kansas's pass success rate on defense allowed is 112th in the country so far. So I know Kansas has faced better competition here, but the defense has been suspect so far, despite them winning. I mean, they're beating good teams. They blew, I said they blew out West Virginia. It was overtime. The score looked worse than it was. But I like Duke to cover. I like Kansas to win. So I'll take some points.
Kansas had to go against your guy JT Daniels. He can sling it.
He can sling it, man. I'm gonna trust the numbers on this one because I'll be honest, I haven't watched a ton of Kansas or Duke games this season, but this game deserves some spotlight on the extra point, even if game day is not going to throw him a bone. So we'll have it be the flagship pick on this podcast. So
we're 1 pick in and we're already disagreeing. So,
hey, I went 6-1 last week. That's your loss, man. That's.
As I said, you didn't tell me that you were like on an absolute heater, but when you asked me to come on here, if I had known that you were just like hitting at a 70% rate here, I might have reconsidered.
Look, 15-6 on the season. We got to keep it going. So let's keep it going in Winston-Salem. Goodness. Wake Forest and Clemson. Wake Forest undefeated at this point. They get Sam Hartman back. Clemson 7.5-point favorites on the road. Haven't looked all that impressive yet. Where are you going? You going Wake Forest or Clemson here?
Yeah, so I'm actually picking Clemson minus the 7.5. Last season, Clemson beat Wake Forest by 21 points. And in that game, Wake Forest's defense actually made Clemson's offense look good, which was difficult to do last season because that was not a good offense. But Clemson scored more points against Wake Forest last season than it did against any other FBS opponent on its schedule. And I don't think this Wake Forest defense has really improved a whole lot. Now, I don't believe the Clemson offense has either, but I look at Sam Hartman and I see a guy who in his 3rd game back after a very limited preseason practice regimen will be going against one of the best defenses in the country. So Wake will get there, but I think you have to take that into account, that this is a guy who missed several weeks of the most important time in the calendar for a team to gel. And it certainly helps that he's been in Clawson's system for forever. He's, if anybody could kind of snap back after missing as much time in camp as he did, Sam Hartman could do it. But I just think you go and look at last year's spread of 21. I don't think this game being at Winston-Salem makes enough of a difference for that to really change things. So I'm going Clemson minus 7.5.
And you're gonna have 10,000 screaming fans there in Winston-Salem. I'm also going Clemson here for a lot of the same reasons. I'll go other side of the ball. So Clemson's defense is ridiculous. That defense is good enough to go win them 10 games this year, even if the offense is terrible. And Wake Forest, even beyond Sam Hartman coming back and being like slow to get back up to being himself, their rush offense has been terrible. Success rate ranks 128th in the country out of 131 teams. That's about as bad as it gets as far as your rush offense goes. That's not helping a quarterback who needs to get back up to speed, is having a terrible running attack. And having a terrible running attack against this defensive line, good luck. Good luck, Wake Forest. I hope I'm wrong. I hope this game is exciting, but I think Clemson wins this game by north of 2 touchdowns. I think the offense is good enough to just go out there and you mentioned that Wake's defense is not much improved over last year, and last year it was one of the worst in the country. So I like Clemson by north of 2 touchdowns in this game. But hey, who knows? Maybe Wake Forest make fools out of both of us on Saturday, but I don't think so.
I'm glad we agree on a pick. That puts me at ease. Like I was going to get real nervous if we were just odds about every single one of these.
No, I like Clemson by a lot in this one. Let's go to the game that game day is going to Knoxville, Tennessee, Florida, where you were a former beat writer, David. So I know you know a lot about this program, graduate of Tennessee as well. So Tennessee, I can't believe this. It's the Florida game, and they're 11-point favorites, double-digit favorites. As someone who is on that beat, how's the Tennessee fan base feeling about being 11-point favorites against Florida?
And most of my friends who are Tennessee fans are actually betting the Florida money line as an emotional hedge here.
Smart.
And like Tennessee was up to like minus 465 on the money line in some places earlier on Tuesday, which is just astronomical. Here's the deal. It's been nearly 20 years since Tennessee has covered a spread this large against Florida. In fact, Florida,
wow,
16 of the last 17 games in the series straight up. So there's just a lot of psychological trauma here for the Tennessee fans. But I mean, I get it. Like if you take the logos off the helmets and put them in neutral colored jerseys, you can see why at home Tennessee has a fairly sizable spread here. It's just, I come back to this. We're assuming that the Anthony Richardson of the past 2 weeks is really who Anthony Richardson is, and not the version that we saw against Utah. It's just, what have you done for me lately in college football? And with Anthony Richardson, it's you've done nothing for me lately. You've looked really bad lately. But are we forgetting that just 3 weeks ago against a top 10 opponent that was coming off of a Rose Bowl appearance, that Anthony Richardson looked like the second coming of Dak Prescott or Cam Newton? Like, I just don't believe that he's going to stay down the rest of the season. I think that he will deliver some big plays in this game against a Tennessee defense, Jacob, that is getting a lot of praise. But keep in mind that praise is solely because of the way it played against Pittsburgh. And this Pittsburgh team doesn't have Kenny Pickett. It doesn't have Jordan Addison. And in that game that Tennessee won up there, they knocked out Keaton Slovis in the second quarter. And then they banged up the backup, Nick Patty, who was playing on a bum leg for the entire second half. So if that's our rationale for thinking Tennessee's defense is a whole lot better, I think it's pretty shaky. So I hesitantly say I think Tennessee will win, but I would take Florida to cover plus 11.
Plus, it's a lot of points for this. So was the only win, was it the Hail Mary at Florida?
So no, it was 03, I think. No, excuse me. I think it was 2016, 2017. It was during the Butch Jones era. Tennessee finally has that demon and beat Florida in the Butch Jones era. But that's the only victory in the last 17 years. So you have to go back to the early 2000s and find when Casey Clausen was the quarterback. The last time that Tennessee beat Florida, twice in a relatively short time frame. And that 2003 game came to mind, but I think that's the last time Tennessee might have covered a 10 or more point spread, in this series.
So you mentioned Anthony Richardson. Which version of him are we going to get? Here's the thing. Even in the Utah game, statistically, You eat a little deep dive. He was not great. So on the season so far, Anthony Richardson ranks 130th in FBS and EPA per pass. 130. He's not been great passing the ball. He's a phenomenal runner. He's a phenomenal athlete. I think he's going to have to score 40. This offense is going to have to score 40 to stay with Tennessee. And I don't think they can. Even with Tennessee's defense, maybe not being a finished product yet. Florida's defensive line, the starting four are great. They are so thin after that starting four. And with as fast as Tennessee is going to play on Saturday, they have not seen this pace of play yet this season. I think you're going to see how thin they are on defense when Tennessee goes and drops 45 and you're crossing the 20-point mark going looking up and looking at a 20-point loss. So I like Tennessee to win. I think they shatter this demon. I think they win going away. I think they win by 3 touchdowns. I don't think it's close on Saturday. I think Tennessee can go into this game confident. They are the better team. They and not just like they're the better team on paper. They're the better team with the eye test. There's more talent on the roster right now at Tennessee. Tell your friends to be confident, man. They're winning this game by 3 touchdowns.
It's too much trauma. There are too many scars there. It's going to be an electric atmosphere. It's going to be lit with game day, and then you
Checkered nailing.
Yeah, and so Napier threw a little fire on the Tennessee fan base this week. He said something about Anthony Richardson playing his first road game of the season, in the system, and somebody asked him about that, and he was like, "Well, we're not going to Canada. The rules are still going to be the same. It might be a little bit louder." And the Tennessee fans pounced on it might be a little bit louder, and they're using that as a slight to sort of hype themselves up for that game. It's going to be wild. I mean, they were throwing golf balls at Lane Kiffin last year. I can't imagine what they're going to.
Man, Neal and security just turns an eye. They're just like, yeah, whatever. You go in. We got to pack 110,000 people in here. So that's hilarious. Big 12, big game in the Big 12. Texas Tech, Texas, only a 5.5-point line. Texas favored in Lubbock. Texas Tech has looked much improved this season. Texas, hey, they got down to UTSA last week. They come back and win that game going away. I was curious how they responded after the Alabama loss, considering how they responded after the Oklahoma loss last season. But very short favorites on the road in Lubbock. Where are you going with this one, David?
Yeah, I'm going Texas minus 5.5. They've scored 133 points against Texas Tech the last 2 times they've played. I think it's 70 and 63, the points total for them. And I understand, look, they're not going to have Quinn Ewers out there. You're banking on Hudson Card to get it done. But I think the hype train around Joey McGuire has gotten a little ahead of schedule here. And it's something we tend to do often with first-year coaches who are recruiting well, who win the press conferences, who are, off-season gurus, right? We saw it with Marcus Freeman. Notre Dame ends up, number 5 in the preseason?
Yeah.
Because their 2022 recruiting class or 23 recruiting class is shaping up. And it's like, well, hold on now. Like he's still got to actually coach games this year and never been a head coach before. Similar situation with Joey McGuire. I think NC State was basically begging Texas Tech to win that game on the road last week. Texas Tech's offense, really just couldn't get it done. And so I think I buy the fact that this Texas defense is legit, like we saw against Alabama. And then, they sealed the game with a pick 6 in the second half against UTSA. So, yeah, I think Texas covers the spread.
I'm with you. And for the same reason you just mentioned, this defense is legit. Like Texas has actually improved on defense in year 2 of the Sark era. And that was the question I had going in was if Texas can marginally improve on defense, can they go win the Big 12? And I absolutely still think they can. I stand by that. I stuck my neck out in the preseason, even through the injuries of Isaiah Nair and, the starting offensive linemen. I'm like, no. They can still go do this thing. They can finish it off. Oklahoma looks good so far, but yeah, this defense is improved and the scheme is working, especially with the kind of offense they're going to face in Texas Tech. I think they can smother this offense. I don't think Texas Tech is going to eclipse the 30-point margin, and I think Texas can. If you can score 31, I don't think Texas Tech scoring 24. So I like this to be a lower scoring game. What's the total on this? 60? That's a pretty good total. That's a pretty good number.
Yeah,
but
Texas has surpassed that on its own the last 2 times they played. I understand like things change, and there's a new coach at Texas Tech who maybe is more defensive minded, but yeah, I just think Texas is going to put up numbers.
I think they could. I wonder if my hesitancy with them just putting up numbers is Card's health. And if they can just run the ball and win this game by 10, I think they might just ice it away and just like sit on the lead and not worry about it. Because Card was questionable up through Thursday of last week if he was even going to play against UTSA. So if he's still dealing with injury, knowing that behind him they got some serious trouble, I think they could sit on running the ball here because Texas Tech's rush defense is not great. Just give Bijan a lot of carries this game, but I still like. I mean, it's less than a touchdown. That's an easy take for me. I think there's a little too much love going Texas Tech's way right now. Hey, so we're 2 of 4 agreeing so far. Let's go to the Pac-12. Your Pac-12. You're the Pac-12 guy for CBS, man. The Cal Bears still waving that flag.
I'm not flag.
Man, I thought you were on something that year. No, Washington State and Oregon.
Yeah, okay. I stand by that. If Cal hadn't been decimated by all the COVID restrictions out there, that they had the roster to do something, and now I've just totally given up. But yes.
So 2020, David picked Cal to win the Pac-12 North. So, brave. But Washington State and Oregon, formerly of the division known as the Pac-12 North. Washington State at home for Oregon. Oregon coming in as a 6.5-point favorite on the road. Both programs have big wins in the last 2 weeks. Washington State over Wisconsin. Oregon beats BYU going away last Saturday. They come in just under a touchdown favorite. Where are you going at Washington State?
Yeah, this is a tough one, man, because Washington State's win at Wisconsin really surprised me. I love the system that they're running at Washington State with Jake Dickert bringing in Eric Morris from Incarnate Word with Cam Ward at quarterback. I think it has a lot of potential. But when I look through the Washington State roster in the preseason, I couldn't help but power rank them second to last in the Pac-12 just based on the experience, based on the talent. So they have blown me away so far this season by starting 3-0, winning that game at Wisconsin. Did not see that coming. And so maybe I get burned again here. But I just think that the offense for Washington State is not clicking at the level it needs to for them to win another game against a team that I think has more physicality and more talent. They're putting more and more on tape now. Oregon showed us their true colors finally against BYU. And say what you will about Bo Nix, but I think he's a better quarterback than Graham Mertz at Wisconsin. And so I think that improvisational bend to Bo Nix's game presents Washington State's defense with an element that it probably hasn't seen so far this season. So I'm going Oregon 6.5. I don't love this one. When we were texting earlier, I was torn on it. I'm going Oregon here. I love what the direction Washington State is headed. I just can't quite get over the talent hump here yet when Washington State already pulled one stunner this season.
I went into when I glanced at the line the first time, I was like, you know what? I'm going Washington State. You know, the pendulum. Everyone's going to be on Oregon after their performance against BYU, and I was looking. The public money is on Oregon, but I do think that's the right side. It is under a touchdown, so I like Oregon to win by at least a touchdown. I know early in the season it's tough because you don't have that many data points yet, and it is hard to get that week 1 image of Oregon out of your head. Like they looked terrible, but I think as we've seen the last couple of weeks, maybe Georgia's just really good.
They are,
and maybe, especially early when like that was a blitzkrieg. That was you were down 3 scores quick in that game. Maybe they packed it in that game against Georgia, knowing that you weren't going to do anything to stop Georgia in that game. They wouldn't beat a really good BYU team. Now, I know BYU had a couple of injuries, a couple of key injuries, but that's a really good BYU team that are just beating Baylor, who I also think is a very good team. So I just think Oregon's good. I think you have a big grouping of good teams from like 7 to 40. That you've got some really good teams. I think Washington State is one of those. I just think Oregon's at least a touchdown better. Like you mentioned, the physicality, this roster, especially on both lines of scrimmage, I don't think Washington State can match up with that.
yeah. And Cam Ward is all the way down at 59 right now nationally in passing efficiency, and this Oregon defense is no joke.
They're not, and they showed that last week against BYU. These inside linebackers finally started playing like their star rating the last couple of weeks. So Justin Flo and Noah Sewell playing really good inside, calling that defense. The defensive line looks really good. Bo Nix, which version of Bo Nix are we going to get? That's the thing. He has had weeks like this before. Or is he going to finally get some development and just stay as a pretty good college quarterback? Can he just do that for a season? Because he'll have his, he scored in the last 7 touchdown drives that he led as as the first string offense. Or is he going to have that Georgia game in him? Is he going to have the one who beat Alabama as a freshman or beat Oregon as a freshman? But you're always due for a Bo Picks game. So I hope it doesn't come in this one.
He's the ultimate chaos player in college football. And if you can just get back to 2019 freshman year with Kenny Dillingham, who was his OC.
That's right.
With him again at Oregon, like I think they get there. Look at Michael Penix; he got there real quick when he reunited with Kalen DeBoer, who had been his OC earlier in his career. I think Bo Nix is going to show some of that again because let's be real, like the Pac-12 defenses on the whole are less talented than the SEC defenses, and maybe the skill talent at Oregon is honestly he didn't have a ton of skill talent at Auburn the last couple of years, so I don't think
not a receiver.
Yeah, it's not significantly worse at Oregon. I think they'll get on track here. And I love Washington State. I think they're a fun team this year. I just think Oregon's better.
I think Oregon's receiver room is the best receiver room he's had in his career. I will
very well.
They were all young and improving, but they've got a deep skill player roster right now at Oregon that Auburn, especially this year, does not have. Let's go to the SEC. So Arkansas and A&M playing in Jerry World. I love this game. This game has been a one possession game, all except for one time that they've played this since Texas A&M joined the SEC. But Texas A&M, technically the home team, it's in Dallas, but 2.5 point favorites in Jerry World. I'm scratching my head at this line, man. Where are you going in Arlington?
Yeah, I think some people are going to get spooked out of taking Arkansas here because of the way Missouri State hung with them into the fourth quarter on Saturday. But I look at the bodies of work of these two teams through 3 games apiece, and I see an Arkansas team that to me appears clearly better. You take into account their wins over Cincinnati and South Carolina are far more impressive than anyone Texas A&M has defeated so far, even Miami, in my opinion. And it's like, it just seems obvious to me when you kind of strip away the preseason rankings around Texas A&M, and if you kind of account for what happened against Murray State from the Arkansas side as a trap game, as Bobby Petrino really bringing his best in a emotional moment, it's a trap game for Arkansas, just as ready-made as they come. And the fact that they turned it on late, I think it showed their character. And let's be real, this is a toss-up almost type of game if you're talking about less than a field goal. And if you're going based on the intangibles, based on the culture, based on the buy-in, based on the caliber of halftime speech that a coach can deliver, I'm taking Sam Pittman over Jimbo Fisher every day in that setting. So I'm going Arkansas plus 2.5 here in the neutral site.
I got burned last week with my head-scratching line. I'm like, man, this is obvious. Michigan State, Washington. Like, Michigan State's just better. Made that my WTF, wrong team favored, game of the week. And I got burned. But that doesn't mean we can't double down and get the WTF game to 2-1. We're 1-1 right now. Yeah, wrong team favored here. Arkansas should be favored. If you strip away preseason expectation, Arkansas is the better team. They're the better team by at least a touchdown, in my opinion. So 100%, they have the better quarterback. They have the better skill position players. They have the better offensive line. Defensive line, you can go either way. Linebackers, Arkansas is better. Secondary, Arkansas is better. Like, they are the better team. They're better coached right now. They have better coordinators on both sides of the ball than Texas A&M has. I just think Arkansas is better. And I know a lot of power ratings through about the 5th week of the season. You still have a lot of heavy preseason numbers baked into those power ratings. And I think that is baking into Texas A&M right now. And I think people watched them beat Miami and said, okay, so the App State game was just a slip up, but they still only scored 17 points. Is this offense going to all of a sudden become world beaters overnight? And they're not. Now, Miami had a lot of trouble moving the ball, but that offense has been inept since week one. I mean, Tyler Van Dyke looks like a different quarterback, and people have made Justin Herbert comparisons with Cristobal of how he looked in Cristobal's system, and that's not unfair. So that offense did not look good against Texas A&M. They just got outskilled there. But this game's a neutral site. Arkansas is rolling. I love Kendall Briles. I love Barry Odom. I love Sam Pittman. I think they have. I told Daniel this a couple weeks ago that I think their head coach and coordinator spots you can match up with anyone else in the country. I mean, just totally can outcoach people. And this game's sitting under a field goal. Arkansas is the better team. Like, don't overthink this.
Yeah,
This we're gonna go 2-1 with the WTF game of the week.
yeah. The fact that Texas A&M slowed down Miami's offense means absolutely nothing to me.
Yeah, Southern Miss did the same thing.
So I'm with you here. I think Arkansas probably wins this game straight up. I mean, we're talking about a less than a field goal spread. They won this game last year too, so I just don't think it's that much of a reach.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're actually betting this kind of stuff, just take the money line here. Like, no reason to take the points. Just take the money. They're going to win the game. So, uh, public money is on Arkansas. It doesn't scare me. It's the right side to be on. Wrong team favored. WTF game of the week. All right, last game. Going back to the Pac-12. My Oregon State Beavers hosting my USC Trojans. we joked around in the offseason. I was very high on USC, very high on Oregon State. So gonna have to take a side here. But Oregon State hosting USC. USC's kind of first real test. Both teams undefeated. USC a 6.5-point favorite on the road. Where are you going? And where in Oregon are they?
Yeah, so I am going Oregon State plus 6.5. Can you believe this apparently opened at USC minus 12.5? I'm gonna have to go check our pick sheet, but I think I might have snuck one in there on you guys on Sunday when the lines first opened.
It was 12.5.
Yeah, it opened at 12.5. And that, I mean, it's quickly been driven down significantly. This would be obvious to go on the Oregon State side with a number that large, but even at 6.5, less than a touchdown, I still like Oregon State at home against a USC team that I think is living on borrowed time. They have enjoyed the misfortune of some other teams to ride up the rankings here. Their numbers, their final scores look great. I don't think most of the nation has actually watched a full USC game. Even when they were in prime time against Stanford, there were other games on that night that were more interesting. And then you look at the Rice game, the Fresno State game, the margins of victory stand out, but the way that they're winning them is not sustainable because their turnover margin is absolutely through the roof. And then if you go and look at Stanford shooting itself in the foot, Fresno State losing Jake Hayner, their star quarterback, I think reality is coming for this USC defense at some point, and it might very well be this Saturday because Oregon State has it rolling under Jonathan Smith, and I think they could potentially win this game. I'm not ready to call it outright, but I'm going with the Beavs to cover the 6.5.
I'm with you on Oregon State. This will be a high-scoring game. Take the over. Both offenses are rolling, but I'm with you on USC is on borrowed time. This defense has not been good. And the reason USC has practiced scoring 40, 50 a game is because they're going to have to do that if they want to continue to win games. And they're going to have to pray that defense holds up. Alex Grinch, to those who have watched the program closely so far, still getting some of the criticism that was a hangover from Oklahoma his last year there, where a lot of people, including myself, thought they would take a step forward under Alex Grinch and honestly did not take that big of a step forward in that last year at Oklahoma. But the USC defense has not looked great so far. And so I definitely think Oregon State can keep this within a touchdown. I would love if this was north of a touchdown. Gosh, I can't believe it opened up at 12.5. That's easy money. 6.5, I'm a little more nervous, but I think USC wins a close game here. So I like USC straight up. I'll be rooting for Oregon State to win straight up, but I will go ahead and take those 6.5 points. I like Oregon State to keep this game close. So this is one of those games I'm really excited to watch. Unfortunately, I don't have the Pac-12 network, so I won't be watching this game. Thank you, Pac-12, but
End up on the Pac-12 network. This would be a perfect like Pac-12 after dark
like
game.
literally BYU Wyoming's on ESPN2 at 10:15.
Yeah, that's
USC or what are we doing here?
That's if you want to see why the Pac-12 is struggling. There's your example because this game is not going to be available to the majority of college football fans around the country.
Utah is playing Arizona State, who just fired their head coach on ESPN, the main one, ESPN, and Oregon State, USC, two undefeated teams, Pac-12 network. Stanford, Washington on FS1. I just don't. That drives me nuts.
Look, I'd offer you my login for Fubo TV, but I can only have 2 streams going at once, and I need them. I need both of them on
You
Saturday.
need both. I hear you, man. To review, Kansas Duke. David on Kansas. I am on Duke. Wake Forest, Clemson. We're both on Clemson. Tennessee, Florida. David, you're on Florida. I am on Tennessee. We're both on Texas against Texas Tech. We're both on Oregon over Washington State. We're both on Arkansas, and then we're both on Oregon State. So hey, let's hope for another big week. We're on 5 games together, so that's at least 5-0.
I'm gonna keep riding your coattails. Hopefully you stay hot. Like, just watch. This will be the week when maybe you're the USC. Maybe you've been living on borrowed time. You know.
That's it. Yeah. I'm just waiting on. I've been getting lucky. A point here, a point there. No, I like the slate this week. My 2 that I questioned a lot were, I'm with you on Oregon, Washington State. I think could go either way, depending on which version of both teams we get, what you could say for any game. I'm a lot more confident in Tennessee, Florida, than you seem to be, but Oregon State's my other one. The 2 Pac-12 games are my kind of coin flips, and I was getting the least amount of eyes on those teams. So,
well, just with that Tennessee pick where we differ, man, it's all about that psychological trauma. I know it's a new era there, year 2 under Josh Heupel. I know Josh Heupel's been saying that Florida game last year is where they took a big step forward, but just the second that, what, Anthony Richardson could get pulled and they could put in whoever I don't even know if Florida has a healthy backup quarterback at this point, but Tennessee fans just, oh man, the energy in that stadium could go sideways, and Florida, it could kind of flip in Florida's favor. That one's going to be fun. I know it's the SEC on CBS game of the week, so I'm not trying to, promote it or anything, but I think that one's going to be a special type of atmosphere in Knoxville.
It will be 3:30 on CBS. I'll go ahead and promote it. So go CBS for getting that game on the main network. But excited for the slate of games. David, thanks so much for being on. You can follow him on Twitter at David A. Cobb. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake Carnes with a K. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Extra Point Pod. But that will do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is David. I'm Jake.